Ever wonder what it's like to be a wine judge? In this video, I'm going to take you behind the scenes to the fascinating, geeky, and sometimes surprising world of wine judging. I'm going to do so through the lens of a recent wine competition in one of California's most underrated regions, in which I served as a wine judge. This experience has given me tremendous insights into the wines of this region, and during this video, I'll also share my thoughts regarding some wines that offer compelling value for the price. Many of these wines are wines that you may want to consider for further selection and potentially including in your personal collection, so be sure to stick around for that. Let's start with the setting. I'm in the Bay Area, about 35 miles east of San Francisco, in Livermore Valley. This is a historic wine-producing region that traces its wine-producing roots way back to the 1760s, when Spanish settlers first started planting grapes for wine production. Wineries like Wente and Concannon were started way back in the 1880s and have operated continuously since that time. Nevertheless, this region is often overshadowed by nearby wine regions like Napa and Sonoma. But this week I discovered that there's many exciting wines being produced in Livermore Valley and that it's experiencing a resurgence. What is it that makes Livermore Valley unique? Well, for starters, it has an east-west orientation. This is significant because it allows cool marine breezes to flow from the Pacific Ocean through the valley late in the afternoon. The result is a high diurnal range, so during the day, it's warm and sunny and the grapes are allowed to ripen, but then there's cooler temperatures in the afternoon and the evening, which slows down the ripening process and allows the grapes to preserve acidity and freshness and to ripen over an extended growing season. The result is wines that have a bit more elegance and freshness than you would expect given the relatively high temperatures that can be achieved during the peak of the summer season. With that by way of background, we're ready to shift gears and talk about the wine competition itself, which was called Uncorked. Livermore Valley has a little more than 40 wineries in the area, and about 23 of them submitted wines for this Uncorked wine competition. In all, we had around 150 wines to judge. Including myself, there were 13 judges that adjudicated this competition. These 13 judges broke down into smaller groups, so I was in a group of 3, for example. And we worked on the Danish system, which means that we were required to achieve a group consensus before awarding medals and deciding winners. Judging these wines is definitely not easy. You don't really know that much information about any of the wines that you're assessing. We're typically given the wines in flights, so oftentimes they would have a common characteristic such as Chardonnay, Rosé, other whites, Italian varietals, and so forth. When we had a general category like other whites or Italian varietals, they would oftentimes tell us the grapes or the dominant grapes for each of the wines that we were evaluating. This is important because one of the criteria used for our evaluations is typicity of the grape variety. In addition, other criteria that we use in our evaluations include balance, structure, overall quality, length of the finish, and so forth. We don't get to see the labels, we don't know the producers, and we don't know the exact price point of any of the wines either. For most of the wine categories, we had no information regarding price, although for some of them they were grouped generally into 2 different price points. For example, Cabernet Sauvignon under $50 and Cabernet Sauvignon $50 and up. Not all the judges tasted every single wine. Rather, each group was assigned a number of wines to evaluate, and then all the panels got together to decide the overall winners for the day. So, for example, my panel was assigned right around 40 wines or so to evaluate, including wines in categories like Cabernet Sauvignon, Italian varietals, other whites, Chardonnay, and Rosé. Working in panels is significant because each of the judges comes into the competition with different strengths and different backgrounds. So, for example, one of the judges in my group was far more experienced with Rosé than I am, but by the same token, the Cabernet Sauvignon over $50 per bottle category was definitely well within my wheelhouse and probably my favorite category that I was assigned to evaluate. In general, I was quite surprised with the quality level of the Cabernet Sauvignons that I evaluated. I expected some of the power in these wines, but many of the best expressions also had some elegance, freshness, and impressive acidity, with some polished integrated tannins. Cabernet Franc can be a fascinating category to evaluate, as you typically get a lot of extremes. Some can be beautifully lifted and aromatic, where others can be brutally green with fierce pyrazines. In fact, the Cabernet Franc category was probably my biggest takeaway from this entire experience in Livermore Valley. UC Davis recently completed an assessment of the growing conditions in Livermore Valley and determined that Cabernet Franc is the red grape variety that's best suited to be produced in this area. As a result, producers are doubling down on Cabernet Franc and planting a lot more of it in their vineyards. In addition, some producers are even making innovative wines like Cabernet Franc Blanc. But in general, I was quite impressed with the Cabernet Franc that I tasted this week, and many expressions offer tremendous quality for the price. Unfortunately, my group was not assigned to evaluate the Rhone Reds, so I didn't taste that many of them during the competition. But it is worth mentioning that I tried a number of impressive Rhone Reds throughout my week in Livermore Valley. They even had some intriguing expressions that were made in a Côte Rôtie style, which means that the Syrah was co-fermented with Viognier. And I also tried some intriguing blends. One producer cleverly refers to them as GPS blends. That is, a blend of Grenache, Petit Syrah, and Syrah. These blends were Syrah dominant, but also included a fairly good percentage of Petit Syrah and then smaller amounts of Grenache. This blend also aged very well, and interestingly, the producer gave me a blind tasting between a 2016 version of the GPS that was in screw cap and a 2016 bottling that was in cork. Somewhat surprisingly, I preferred the version under screw cap. In fact, if I wasn't aware when I was evaluating the wines that the wines were the exact same vintage, I would have guessed that the wine in the bottle that had the cork was a much older wine, perhaps at least 3 or 4 years older, as that wine was much farther along in its evolution. It had much more earth and tertiary descriptors and far less fruit. In contrast, the bottle that was made with screw cap was fresh and vibrant and still had some impressive fruit left. My group was assigned to evaluate the Italian reds, and there were about 12 of them. 2/3 of them were Primitivo. There was definitely a wide range of quality here, but the best expressions were elegant and restrained with ample acidity. The most successful wines in this category were the Sangiovese, and there was one standout in particular that did extremely well in the context of the overall reds that were evaluated at the end of the show. While it was not the overall winner, it had an extremely strong showing and probably finished in the top 3 out of the 10 red winners for the day. I should also mention that it was a Sangiovese-based rosé that won the rosé category as well. So Sangiovese is definitely capable of making some extremely strong wines in Livermore Valley. The rosé category was extremely interesting as well, as it produced the closest thing to a dispute between some of the panels that we saw that day. There were 10 different rosés in all. My panel was assigned to review 5 of them, and another panel was assigned to the other 5. Once each panel assigned a winner, we did head-to-head competition between those 2 wines, and that's when things got interesting. Each of the group leaders for the respective tables dug in and doubled down on their choices and refused to give in. So about an hour later, we retasted the wines and ended up divided along group lines again. So we had to have these 2 wines evaluated by another table. Ultimately, they decided to go along with my group and award the Sangiovese-based rosé the winner. Shifting gears and moving to the white wines, there were 3 different categories here: Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and other whites. With respect to Chardonnay, of course, Livermore Valley is home to the famous Wente clone, so there's certainly an abundance of Chardonnay produced here, and there were a wide variety of styles, with everything from lean, high acidity, unoaked styles to round, oaky, buttery expressions, and everything in between. Earlier I mentioned the UC Davis study that evaluated the growing conditions in Livermore Valley. With respect to white grape varieties, They ultimately determined that Sauvignon Blanc is the most promising candidate for producing high-quality wines in Livermore Valley. So Sauvignon Blanc is certainly a trending category in Livermore Valley as well. Ultimately, however, it was an Albarino that was the overall winner of the White Wine of the Day category. This was an extremely impressive showing for this Albarino, and 10 or 11 out of 13 judges voted for that Albarino. The group judging that I've been discussing determined the winners for each of the 12 different categories that were involved in the Uncorked Wine competition. But after that, we awarded an overall white winner from among the 3 white wine winners and an overall red winner from among the winners of the 10 different red categories. As mentioned, the Albarino won the white wine category in a landslide. In terms of the red wines, I thought there were a number of very strong competitors. The Cabernet Sauvignon over $50 was quite formidable. The Sangiovese-based Italian red did quite well also. But ultimately, the winner of the day was the Cabernet Franc over $50 per bottle. For this particular competition, the wines had a pretty high floor, and there weren't that many wines that were outliers on the low end. In contrast, there were a number of excellent and enjoyable wines at the high end, and in particular, any of the 13 wines that were the winners of their category would be wines that I would enjoy any day of the week. Following the competition, a number of the judges stuck around for a day or two and made the rounds visiting a number of producers and tasting more of the wines and meeting some of the winemaking teams. In general, I came away extremely impressed following these visits. There's a number of talented winemakers in this area and some producers making some exciting wines, many of which sell for reasonable prices. It's an extremely enjoyable place to visit. Everyone is very friendly and hospitable, and when you visit wineries, oftentimes you're able to communicate directly with either an owner or a winemaker. The food scene is also quite good, and we ended up enjoying a number of high-quality meals as well. So definitely the next time you're in the Bay Area, you may want to give Livermore Valley a try.